Election Week in South Africa, and sharp focus falls on how cases of this nature are processed within our child protection system. Lucy Jamieson is a senior researcher at the University of Cape Town's Children's Institute. She joins us now via Skype. Good afternoon, Lucy, and thank you so much for your time on the SABC News Desk.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Lucy, the last time you and I spoke, you had just completed a child abuse tracking study, which showed that social workers and police officers fail to coordinate their work or collaborate thoroughly enough in child protection matters, leaving our children more at risk for further abuse. Can you just give us a sense of how an abused and neglected child experiences our child protection system right now?
Unfortunately, most children don't even make it into the child protection system. So we estimate that between 1 in 7 and 1 in 9 cases, children don't tell anyone. They actually keep it a secret because they can see around them that we live in a very violent society. They see other children who report and taken seriously, and they see cases where children do report and are further abused by the system. So that's the first problem, is getting children to actually speak up and acknowledge and seek help. And then when they do, sadly, as you've said, many of them have an experience where they're traumatized even further by the services they receive. Because the police and social workers don't work together, often children end up having to tell their story several times. Their story is then exposed, which leaves them at greater risk if nothing is done with the perpetrators. And often, we found that in less than 10% of the cases was there actually a conviction. Again, in large part to do with the lack of collaboration, poor supervision and weak skills and lack of resources in these services, so that most perpetrators, even in reported cases, end up back in the homes, back in the same communities as the children that they had abused.
Lucy, you've tracked these cases since 2013. That's about 5 years since the report came out. How thoroughly are our national child protection protocols being followed by social workers and police officers right now?
So, one of the great things that we're seeing, let's acknowledge that we have a new president and a new cabinet. And leadership is a really important factor in terms of ensuring actually that services are delivered faithfully on the ground. So we've got a new president who has publicly stated that he is, going to make ending gender-based violence and femicide a particular priority for government. But that's not the same as violence against children. Violence against children typically is in the home. We've seen today on the news that 3 children potentially murdered by their father are being laid to rest. That isn't covered by gender-based violence and femicide, although they're deeply, deeply linked. And one of the problems in terms of services is that because we have so few resources, that social workers and police officers are stretched to doing the response work, that they don't have time to do the holistic prevention work that's sorely needed. If we want to end the deaths of children, if we want to end gender-based violence, we actually need to pay serious attention to what's happening in the home and in our communities. And it starts with the very simple step of hitting children, and yet the very people who have the skills to teach our parents how to care for children are spending so much time working at the end of the scale, dealing with cases after children are reporting abuse, but they don't have the time to stop the abuse from happening.
Lucy, can you help us understand what your study found when it came to how the actual child protection investigations are conducted, the length of time they take, the level of interagency coordination? Because we see time and time again a clear lack of coordination or cohesion between the three main response units, being the SAPS, social services and pathology.
Okay, well, don't forget that there's also health services in terms of a therapeutic response. So what should happen when a child reports abuse is that all four agencies should work together. You should see the police doing the investigation, dealing with the perpetrator. The pathology services need to look at the actual evidence. The social workers need to work with the family and support the child, and then health needs to provide therapeutic services to rehabilitate the child and help them deal with the trauma over the course of sometimes up to 2 years. But what's happening in practice is that investigations can take a year or 2 years. It takes months, if not years, for the pathology services to actually determine and do the analysis of the rape kits that are sent in. Often, police and social services are not exchanging cases, so that you may find that a physical abuse or neglect case that's reported to social services never actually ends up with a criminal investigation being conducted by the police services. And all of these are processes that are taken way longer than they should do. So you've got time delays. We find in our study that we looked at 258 cases, and only 2 of those cases was there a joint investigation by police and social services. And that means that some children are not getting the therapeutic support that they need, whilst in other cases there's no criminal investigation.
Lucy, how do we start closing these gaps that you're telling us about between child protection, child welfare, the protection laws and actual service delivery? Because, 2 cases in 258 in your study, which got police and social services together, is quite alarming at this point.
Well, as I say, I think it actually starts right at the top. You've heard the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, in our modern day, it takes a whole community. And at a government level, the Minister of Social Development will be today launching Child Protection Week. She'll be travelling around the country. You can't do this alone. It takes all of government services. It takes the whole cabinet to jointly create a safe environment and an effective child protection system. So, for example, many children experience abuse on their way to school. What do we need? We need to make sure that there are visible policing services. We need to make sure that there's safe transport. We need to make sure that communities are designed in a way that actually enhances safety. We need to make sure that there are safe parks for children to play in after school. All these competencies don't lie with the Minister of Social Development. They lie with the police, they lie with human settlements, they lie with the Department of Transport. So that's what I'm saying, is that, it's not enough for the Minister of Social Development to do a good job. Everybody has to take child protection seriously. We need to ensure that there's a healthy economy that provides good jobs for parents, because poverty is an additional stress that leads to abuse and interpersonal violence in the home. We need to make sure that there's less overcrowding so that children have safe places to sleep. Again, these are not in the domain of social development. We need to make sure that we take a whole community approach in order to, stop child abuse from happening, to reduce all those different risk factors. And then in relation to social development, the Social Development Minister is going to have to take a very strong lead on this. The women's sector very rightly are making a loud noise about the levels of abuse against women in this country. You know, up to 50% of adult women experiencing gender-based violence in our homes. Children witness that violence. It is just as devastating effect on those children as actually experiencing violence. So we need a minister who will stand up, lead the whole of Cabinet and our communities behind her to say, stop violence against women, stop violence against children, and it needs to start not sometime in the future, it needs to start today. And that means that she needs to mobilise resources that go into our communities. There are some fantastic programs that are showing that if we work...
I'm going to have to stop you there. We are running out of time. That's the Children's Institute, Lucy Jamieson from UCT, joining us via Skype there. Thank you so much for your time on the SABC News Desk. Time now to take a look at your weather details.